With the release of Evil Dead Rise, it's time to rank the Evil Dead movies from good to great. Before we get into this video, Ash vs. the Evil Dead will not be on this list just because I simply have not been able to see it, but there's still 5 movies that I really enjoy to talk about on this list, so let's dive into it. Coming in at number 5 is going to be Army of Darkness. This is a movie I have a lot of fun with, and it's also a movie you can tell that Sam Raimi had a lot of fun making. Both him and Bruce Campbell team up once again to create this fever dream of a movie. It's so bombastic and wacky and silly and all over the place that it presents a ton of elements that are just pure fun. It still contains a lot of the nuances from the previous 2 Evil Dead films, but this one is much more heavily focused on the humor than the gore. To an extent, it actually comes off like a parody of itself. It really plays into the visual gags, the one-liners, the big punchlines, and it really feels like Ash is more of a caricature of himself here. He's not as layered of a character. He's much more just silly for the purpose of being silly. And while I admire a lot of the visuals and a lot of the humor throughout, and I think that it's very quotable, very funny, an enjoyable time, it just strays away a little too much for me from those other elements that make me love the franchise. More of the horror, it's not as focused on that. There's still plenty of gore, there's still plenty of violence and fun to be had. It's just not as focused on the horror that I really appreciate. That being said, it's still a movie that I really quite love, and it's one that I probably turn on more often than the rest of the movies. It just doesn't hit as hard for me. At number 4 is Evil Dead 2013, the film directed by Fede Alvarez, which was a remake of the original Evil Dead movie. This film works for me in a lot of ways, and I think it might be the best produced out of all of the films within this franchise. Fede Alvarez decided to take a more grounded, realistic, well, as much realism as you can have in this type of franchise approach to the movie. And while he kept a lot of those core elements that make the Evil Dead movies what they are, he also still decided to take it in a new direction, a unique vision for the franchise, a unique vision of this story and how it can be told. So things within the plot are switched up a bit, there's new characters within, and it's also just more violent and less humorous, which I would say is the only thing that holds this back from being any higher on this list. It is extremely violent, extremely gory, to the point to where there are moments throughout that I am cringing, that I have to look away, that are extremely uncomfortable for me to bear because it just takes it to very, very high extremes. And with cutting back on the humor, it sort of loses some of the charm of an Evil Dead movie, which as for not giving us a break in between all of the violence, all of the disturbing moments or imagery, so it's just a consistently violent and dark movie that never really stops or gives you any room to breathe. I do think Jane Levy is a great addition to this franchise. I think her role in this movie is very interesting, and I do appreciate the way that they actually took more time to flesh out more of the characters, actually give a compelling backstory, and make everything make sense into the context of the story, to where it feels much more narratively rich than the original Evil Dead movies. There's a lot that I love about this movie. There is a lot that I appreciate. It's just not one that I go back and rewatch as often as the other films on this list. But kicking off the top 3 is Evil Dead Rise, directed by Cronin, a film that was originally supposed to go on to HBO Max, but eventually was transitioned to a theatrical release just because they noticed that the theater experience as a whole was getting bigger once again. People were actually going out to see movies on the big screen, and I think that they made the right call with releasing this in the theaters because it's made on a very, very low budget in a small, contained location, and so there's plenty of opportunities for it to make its budget back. This is a movie that I was excited for. It was one of my most anticipated movies of the year, and overall, I think it serves the franchise incredibly well. Hello?
Open up now.
Nope. It's sort of a hybrid of the grotesque nature of the Evil Dead remake from 2013 and the humorous edge that Sam Raimi brought to his original trilogy. It is extreme and over the top and gory and violent, but at the same time, there are plenty of moments throughout that make you laugh and sort of just sigh with this sense of uncomfortability or awkwardness because some of the lines that the characters are citing throughout the film. Alyssa Sutherland, who plays the mother in this film, who gets possessed and becomes the deadite that is going after her entire family, delivers some very, very compelling sequences. She really commits to the role, and you can tell she was both having a lot of fun with it, but also wanted to scare your socks off. And I think it works not only because it's confined to such a small location with limited places to shoot and with limited places for these characters to go and to escape. In fact, there's no real way to escape because they're in this high rise in Los Angeles after an earthquake that seems like it's crumbling underneath their feet. The more interesting aspect is that you have sympathy for these characters because their mother is the one who has been transformed into this deadite who is going after them. So they're left with no protection because their one protector is coming after them. I think Lee Cronin did his best to honor the legacy of the franchise while adding his own unique flavor to it, and while there are things and plot holes throughout that hold the movie back from being as great as it possibly could have been, I really enjoyed the ride throughout. It's got some very, very fun moments, some quotable scenes, and some imagery that I thought was top notch. The camera work here, the practical effects, the commitment to all of the performances was all great. And I think for an Evil Dead movie being released in the year 2023, this was about as good as it possibly could have been. But kicking off the top two is The Evil Dead, directed by Sam Raimi, the one that started it all, in a film that when people went into it for the first time had absolutely no idea what they were getting themselves into, but has since become such a classic that people look back on still today and admire the way that it took the approach of practicality, admire the fact that it was able to accomplish so much with such a low budget. And this is the movie that proved that Sam Raimi is just a very interesting filmmaker that has a lot of unique ideas. The intrigue here is that you don't know necessarily all of the details of why these things are happening. It just sort of happens, and it makes it more effective that it's taking place in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by trees, in this cabin in the woods where there's really nowhere you can go, nowhere you can call, and very little room to escape. Because of when the film was released, as well as the very minimal budget that Raimi had while making it, he had to rely heavily on the practical effects and gore, and for the most part, it makes it feel grimy and dirty, which only elevates the horrors of it all. On top of that, Bruce Campbell plays a great character in Ash Williams, who is unfazed by it all, light on his feet, quick to react, and he sets himself up to be this icon that since people have grown to love and be attached to so much. He's the reason why years later they eventually made a spin-off show called Ash vs. the Evil Dead, to where he is the driver. He's in the driver's seat and he takes it on by himself because the way that the character was crafted, there's just so much about it that's so interesting, a little mysterious, and just very charismatic. The tension, the humor, the practicality, all of it sort of comes together to make this concoction of a very, very fun, enjoyable horror movie that I still, to this day, absolutely love. But at number one, I have Evil Dead 2. This is sort of like the Aliens to Ridley Scott's Alien. It takes all of the aspects that we love about the first, but it sort of elevates it and provides more of an action-centric film than horror. It still has the horror throughout, and it has that injected grit to it, but it's also more humorous, much bigger. Ash really steps into this leading role. He becomes this main protagonist that is more like an action hero than just a victim to the Deadites and to the evil coming at him. I think it's even more visually interesting than the first because they got a little bit more of a budget on this one, and it really is a direct continuation from the first one, where Evil Dead was, these things from the forest are coming to attack me, I don't know what to do. Evil Dead 2 is, okay, I've kind of got an idea of what this thing is. Now it's time to take it down. Now it's time to get my chainsaw and go out there and chop these things up to pieces. It contains more of the charm while also expanding on the lore and just doing everything the first film did, but even better. By far, out of the first three, I think this is the most technically well-made movie. I think it has the sharpest screenplay, the best performances. I think Bruce Campbell is at the top of his game here, and Sam Raimi is just having so much fun, and it's evident throughout the entire runtime. Well, after watching Evil Dead, it doesn't seem like the type of film that would warrant a franchise or that needs a continuation, but after seeing Evil Dead 2, it proves that this is one of the most consistent franchises in the horror genre, that Sam Raimi had plenty of interesting ideas, and he really capitalized on it in the best way possible. I just think Evil Dead 2 has the best of every element that this franchise represents, and it's the one I by far enjoy the most. So there you have it, guys. That is my ranking of the Evil Dead franchise. I know some of my picks are going to be a bit controversial, but what ranking is it? Make sure to comment down below and let me know your ranking of the franchise, because I'd really like to hear where you guys have some of these picks. What's your favorite? What's your least favorite? Overall, I love this franchise. I think every single installment has something good to offer, and none of them I would consider bad by any means. I'm just happy that in 2023, they're still delivering movies that continue to pay off and provide plenty to enjoy, that it seems to be a franchise that's got something enough there that's interesting, that can keep your attention and keep entertaining for years and years and years. It's very fun to see. But as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to leave a like on this video and subscribe if you haven't already. And until next time, I'll see y'all later. Peace out.